Welcome to Better Than Ever Live on this pre-Thanksgiving extra show that we are doing Better Than Ever Live. I hope you're making today your masterpiece, wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening, whether you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook Live. And I am grateful for that. And I see people on all three platforms. I'm excited about that. Or if you're listening to this after the fact on podcast form at the gym or driving to or from work, wherever that is, I hope you're making today your masterpiece. Yes, this is a bonus episode that we are doing today as, hey Robert, happy Thanksgiving. This is honestly just one I wanted to do to thank you for watching or listening. I've been doing this now a few months and I've been very, very pleased with it, and we have ideas to grow the show. Maybe I'll talk about that toward the end, but I'm just grateful to be here. So in addition to doing a normal show with lots of good, interesting stories today, I'll also take any questions you have, because Friday, as much as I thought I was going to, Friday I will not be doing an Ask Dr. Geier live. So if you have health, wellness, injury type questions, definitely send those to me. As always, I am not giving specific medical advice. This is meant for educational and informational purposes only. If you have specific medical questions, please talk to your doctor. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on some of these things that we're going to talk about. Some of these are actually kind of funny or counterintuitive, and so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Also, I'm kind of curious, and I realize I've got viewers and listeners not in the United States, and so they hear me mention Thanksgiving and they're like, either what the heck is that, or it's not a holiday for us. And so you'll just have to bear with me today. I will probably talk about Thanksgiving because, as healthy as I am and as much as I work out and all that, I'm going to eat probably a fair amount of unhealthy foods this weekend, and I'm actually pretty excited about it. Maybe I'll make up for that by a 3-day fast next week or something like that, but I'm pretty excited about it. So if you want to share your favorite Thanksgiving food or Thanksgiving meal, I'd love to know what that is. I don't actually know that I have one. It's funny, I heard somebody talking about this on another podcast I listened to, one based out of Memphis. I'm a big Memphis Grizzlies fan, and they were talking about how mac and cheese is their favorite Thanksgiving food. And when did that become a Thanksgiving food? I didn't grow up in the right place. I love mac and cheese. On the rare occasions I eat it, but I've never thought of that as a Thanksgiving food. Mine would be pumpkin pie. Again, not something terribly helpful, but I love it. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'll probably have questions like that, but going forward throughout the show, I'd love to hear your Thanksgiving foods. All right. Interesting study comes out of Australia looking at what might be better for aging and metabolic health. Diet and some different ways to change your diet, or medications, drugs.
It's a study published in Cell Metabolism, and what they did, it's a mouse study. This is not really something you could test on humans very effectively, but they had 40 different dietary strategies, varying the amounts of protein and fat and carbohydrate balance, the amount of calories, and then 3 drugs that acted on the liver. And what they were looking at is not just the metabolic pathways and what the cells did, but looking at fundamental changes within the cells. What they found is that the 3 liver affecting drugs did affect how our cells respond to diet, but they didn't actually do anything to the cells themselves, didn't do anything permanently. Diet, on the other hand, did. For example, more protein eaten increase the activity of the mitochondria in cells, which are the cell's powerhouse activities, and they increase the creation of genes that led to the building of more proteins, helping the cells function more properly, and that plays a big role in aging. So if you want to have a lasting impact on your metabolic health, diet may be much more important than medications. Now, there are a number of there's tons of drug companies looking at this, but there's this holy grail look that they're going to be able to figure out some magic pill that counteracts whatever we eat in our diet. So you can eat fast food all day long, take a pill, and you're just as healthy as if you had had a regular meal, maybe 5 amino 1 MQ. I mean, there's a number of them being studied right now. I don't expect in our lifetimes we're going to figure that out. Maybe I'll be wrong. I'll be kind of interested if we can do that. But the benefits of a healthy diet far outweigh just about anything else, even probably more than exercise. They're probably both important, but diet, very, very important. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm drinking my Tianchi. It's actually the second one I've had today. And again, I'm not sponsored by them. I just love this energy without the caffeine. But anybody that's ever had it, and again, it's Chinese adaptogens. It's really good. It has sort of a raspberry flavor. Somebody needs to explain to me how to keep all the powder from accumulating at the bottom. It doesn't matter how much you stir it up. It seems to come out of suspension and pile up at the bottom. And I am not going to stir it with a spoon and annoy you guys as we're drinking it. All right. I am a big fan of intermittent fasting. I do it most days of the week. And as I mentioned earlier, I may do a 3-day fast next week. I do usually a 3-day fast every month to 2 months, but very frequently 16, 18-hour, 20-hour fasts pretty much every day. And I've been really pleased with it for a number of reasons. There are studies that show it boosts your metabolism. There's studies that show intermittent fasting can help you lose weight. And now a study presented at the American Heart Association conference says that intermittent fasting may be anti-inflammatory. And I think this is fascinating. What they did, they took 67 people that had one feature of metabolic syndrome, whether it was obesity, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes. 36 of them basically did 24-hour periods of water only, and they did that for 2 days a week, but not 2 consecutive days. They did that for 4 weeks, and then 1 day a week for 22 weeks, 1 day of just water only, essentially intermittent fasting. Not how most people do it. Most people do all their meals in 4 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours. They did 24 straight hours water only, and then the control group did nothing. The ones in the intermittent fasting group had lower rates of insulin resistance, lower numbers of metabolic syndrome features, and they had higher rates or higher levels of galectin, make sure I get this right, galectin-3, which is a protein that has anti-inflammatory properties. So this is something that if you're obese, if you have high blood pressure, if you have any of the features of metabolic syndrome, intermittent fasting may be something worth considering. Especially when you're talking about inflammation, which is associated with so many components of aging and autoimmune disorders and asthma and cardiovascular disease and dementias we're going to talk about in a little bit. Lots of reasons we need to get inflammation under control, and intermittent fasting may be a great way to do that. Now, how you do that, there's not one approach to intermittent fasting. Some people say, all right, you fast for 16 hours, like skipping breakfast, so your dinner the night before is your last meal, skip breakfast and then have lunch, eat your lunch and dinner all within a 6 or 8 hour window, and then that's your feeding period. The rest of that 24-hour cycle is fasting. Some people, they eat normally for 5 days, they cut it down to 400 calories or so, 500 calories for the other 2 days. There's a lot of different ways to do this. And really, there are no studies that prove that one is better than the other, but that's something to start looking into and tinkering with that as something you might consider adding to your feeding schedule on a regular basis. And intermittent fasting seems to work, doesn't really seem to matter what type of food you're eating. Now, what type of food you're eating matters for all sorts of other reasons, but in terms of the benefits of intermittent fasting, it's just literally the period of time without food. All right, we are all probably going to eat a bunch of junk over the next 30 days or so, and there will be a whole lot of people December 31st, January 1st, saying they're going to start a diet. They may say, all right, I'm going to do the Mediterranean diet, or I'm going to become a vegan or pescatarian, or I'm going to do Atkins or South Beach or keto or something like that, carnivore diet even. Well, that can be helpful, but it can be a lot of work. But you don't want to do all that work and have it not pay off. And so there's a new study, I think this is really interesting, looking at why that might not work and what might fix that. What happens when you switch, or when you're on any kind of nutrition plan, whether you're eating a bunch of junk food or eating a healthy diet, is that the organisms in your gut either increase or decrease in response to those foods. If you make a good change in your diet, your gut microbiome will get better, but not very quickly. That takes time. And unless you get that fixed, the results of your diet aren't going to change that fast. So what these researchers did, they put overweight people into two groups. One, liquid-only diet for 5 days. The other group did nothing. Essentially, half the group fasted. And guess what? They had a better response to their diets because they had higher levels of healthy bacteria in their gut. So if you're going to make a New Year's resolution to start a diet, and I've got thoughts that we'll do in December about New Year's resolutions, but if you're going to switch your diet, you might consider either a period of intermittent fasting or even a 1, 2, 3 day fast. If you do longer fast, you might want to talk to your doctor about how to do that safely, but it might influence your gut bacteria, which gives you better results with the diet going forward. Honestly, I don't know about vitamin E and prostate cancer. That's another one I'll have to look up. I have not heard that risk, quite honestly, so I will tentatively say no, but I don't know the answer to that. I will look that up. All right. So my my world before really adding functional and integrative medicine has been orthopedic surgery and orthopedic sports medicine. And so I've always been really interested in bone health. And we talk about osteoporosis and osteopenia for women mostly, but 2 million men in this country have osteoporosis and 12 million have osteopenia, which is a precursor to osteoporosis. And that weak bones can lead to all kinds of problems with fractures, and those fractures that lead to surgery or chronic disability that makes it difficult to move around, and just all sorts of different health problems. So we need to make sure that our bone health is good. A new study published in the Journal of Medicinal Food looked at one particular food that may be beneficial for bone health in men. They put 66 men into two different groups. One that was a control group, no change in their diet. The others ate 10 to 12 prunes a day for a year. And probably not surprisingly, the ones that ate prunes every day had much better bone protective effects, much more positive changes in their bone health. Why? Well, prunes have a lot of things that protect bones: fiber, vitamin K, magnesium, potassium, boron, copper, and polyphenols. So if you're a male and you're concerned about bone health, maybe adding prunes to your diet might be a good idea. I will sort of sheepishly admit I have never, ever in my life had a prune. I have nothing against them. I just have never been anywhere that served them. They don't particularly look all that appetizing to me. I've just never had it. So that may be something I tried just for giggles sometimes just to see what it tastes like. But in theory, it could be very good for you. But in much better news to me, there is a fruit that now some people are calling it the best fruit you can eat for your gut health. And if you've watched this show long enough, you probably know what my favorite fruit is. I'll take you up on this. I will have a prune. They're tasty. I'll try it. I don't mind. Should I cook them in any kind of way or prepare them in any kind of way or just eat them straight up? Somebody let me know that. All right, the best fruit, like I say, my favorite fruit, if you've watched this show for any period of time, you probably know this, but apparently now some people are calling it the best fruit for your gut health. This is a study out of UCLA, and they are grapes. Grapes have all kinds of benefits that we've talked about on this show before. They can improve your sleep, improve your response to chemotherapy, interestingly enough. But a new study out of UCLA shows that they have a positive effect on your gut microbiome, as well as your cholesterol levels and bile acid levels. What is it about grapes? High fiber content and these phytochemicals called catechins. I don't know what is wrong with my pronunciation today. Catechins. I should know that. EGCGs, epigallocatechins. What catechins do is they fight inflammation in your body. And again, we've talked all over the place about inflammation. They promote good bacteria in the gut and they balance out your intestinal flora. What these UCLA researchers did is they gave people, not the control group, but the other people, 46 grams of grape powder every day, which is essentially 2 servings of grapes. And after 4 weeks, lower levels of LDL cholesterol, that's the bad cholesterol, and the diversity of their gut bacteria increased significantly. Now, 2 servings of whole grapes sound great. I am curious. So I've got 3 containers of grapes in my refrigerator. I just bought at Trader Joe's yesterday. They're 2-pound containers of grapes. And I have been known once in a while to eat the entire 2-pound container. So I don't know how many servings of fruits and vegetables that is, 4 or 5. But I love me some grapes. So very good for your gut bacteria. Watermelon. I'm sort of lukewarm. I like watermelon. With me, watermelon is more of a situational type thing. If I'm at a cookout or somewhere like that, I like it. Whereas if it's mixed like in a fruit salad or something, not as much for me. But not everybody likes grapes. Some people apparently like prunes. I will find out if I like prunes. But fruit, I'm a big fan of fruit. I know fruit has taken a hit with this keto and low carb movement, but I still think there's a role for fruits because of their fiber, their vitamin content, especially at night, eating your carbs late in the day. I think they can be really good for you. All right, another study out of Harvard looked at if you want a lower risk of heart disease, you may just make a simple switch to your diet. And what they looked at, this was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, probably the premier medical journal in this country, looked at sodium and potassium in your diet to see what effect it had on your risk of stroke, on your risk of heart attacks, and all sorts of other heart events. Sodium, we know sodium, it's in table salt. The real problem with sodium, really in the salt that you put on your food, it's the sodium in your food, in all the processed foods, the canned foods, the box foods. Really, really high levels of sodium because it's essentially a preservative and an antimicrobial, basically keeps bacteria out. And so sodium is really high in processed foods. If you want to cut your sodium dramatically, it's not the table salt you really have to worry about, even though that can help, but it's just not eating all those processed foods. Potassium, you find it in bananas, green vegetables, leafy green vegetables, beans, nuts, dairy, starchy vegetables. And it's the opposite of sodium in terms of its effect. Relaxes blood vessels and helps to get your body get rid of sodium. So what they did, this was 10,000 adults in this study. They measured 24-hour urine samples to really know how much sodium and potassium people were getting every day, and then followed these people for 9 years looking for heart events, heart attacks, strokes, things like that. In the course of the 9 years, 571 of them had strokes, heart attacks, things like that. And they found a dose-dependent relationship on both sodium and potassium in your risk of these heart events. Basically, for every 1,000 milligrams more of sodium that you had every day, it increased your risk of heart disease 18%. Potassium, on the other hand, was exactly the opposite. For every additional 1,000 milligrams of potassium you had, again, beans, leafy green vegetables, bananas, that type of thing, your risk of heart disease dropped 18%. So your goal, less sodium, more potassium, as much as you can in your diet. One way to potentially get salt out of your diet would be, instead of putting table salt on your food, maybe you cook with more herbs and spices. A study out of Penn State University looked at, and this was also researchers at Oxford, and this was published by the American Society of Nutrition, found that adults who put 1.3 teaspoons of herbs and spices in their food every day lowered their blood pressure over a 4-week period. 71 people with risk factors for heart disease, and then they were put into 3 groups: low herbs and spices diet, moderate herbs and spices, and high amounts of herbs and spices. Again, the 1.3 teaspoons a day. And it was all kinds of herbs and spices: basil, thyme, cinnamon, turmeric, all sorts of different kinds of things. And what they found is that the ones in the highest amounts of herbs and spices had the lowest systolic blood pressure after the 4 weeks. So if you're trying to cut salt out of your diet and make your food tasty without salt, try herbs and spices instead. All right, this is one I've been waiting for since I started this show, and you'll know why almost immediately when I start talking about it. This is a study looking at meat-based burgers, animal-based protein burgers, and plant-based burgers. So these researchers at University of Illinois and Colorado State looked at pork burgers, 80% lean beef burgers, 93% lean beef burgers, and then compared them to the Impossible Burger, which is soy-based, or the Beyond Burger, which is pea-based. And what they were looking at is not overall health. They were looking at specifically essential amino acids. You know, we talk about getting protein, but what our bodies really need are all the essential amino acids. And, you know, some amino acids are more easily digested in some forms rather than others. And this study looked at how easily digestible the essential amino acids were, comparing pork burgers, beef burgers, the Impossible Burger, and the Beyond Burger. And they did it with buns and without buns, because I guess in these authors say that hamburger buns, low nutritional quality, actually can affect your absorption of essential amino acids. So what they found is that the pork burgers and the beef burgers ranked excellent as far as digestibility of these amino acids when done without buns, and actually when eaten with buns. And again, most people eat beef burgers with buns. The Impossible Burger for people 3 years old and up was also rated excellent as a source of digestible essential amino acids, not for kids under 3. And the Beyond Burger was ranked as good. Now, what they found was that when you had an Impossible Burger with a bun, that went from excellent amounts of digestible amino acids to good. Whereas, again, the beef and pork, the bun didn't seem to have an effect. Now, I will tell you, I don't know how many people, you know, if you're eating the Impossible Burger for health, you're probably not going to eat empty carbs on a bun anyway. But having said that, I don't mind this study in the sense that they're not talking about overall health. They're just talking about one factor, absorption of essential amino acids. And so I get that. But just take a wild guess who paid for this study. Wild guess. Real quick, figure that out. This was published in the European Journal of Nutrition, by the way. It was published by, I just closed it here, the Beef Checkoff and National Pork Checkoff. So the meat industry, the beef and pork industry sponsored this study. And I've said all along, follow the money in these. And this may be a great study, and I don't actually have that much of a problem with the study, but I always worry about when the funding for a study comes from a party with an interest in the outcome, that might influence the outcome of the study. You know, it'd be like if I got paid by Tianqi to talk about this, I'd probably talk all the time about it. I am not sponsored by it, but you know, when you see these reviews of products on YouTube and various video sites, keep that in mind. Look in the description, see if they say that this is a sponsored post or something like that. Might influence the rating or the review that person gives. And that's just one of the little things to look for in nutrition research and really all medical research. All right, back to inflammation. We know that anti-inflammatory diets are one of the biggest ways to lower your inflammation. The more anti-inflammatory foods you eat, lower your inflammation. And this new study suggests that may influence your risk of dementia and cognitive decline. When we talk about anti-inflammatory foods, and there's a great website, I don't think it's free. I think you have to pay like $5, I can't remember, maybe $20, and it literally ranks thousands of foods and gives it a score on inflammation, whether it's an anti-inflammatory food, which would be positive, or a pro-inflammatory food, which would be negative. And the ones that are remarkably negative, processed foods for sure, bags, boxes, cans, sugar, unhealthy oils, those cooking vegetable oils that are really terrible for you, huge amounts of red meat, and alcohol. And then the anti-inflammatory foods, fish, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, tea, legumes, things like that. Well, what this study did, they wanted to look at the effect of anti-inflammatory diets and pro-inflammatory diets on your cognitive health. This was published in the journal Neurology. Over 1,000 people in the study, none of whom had dementia when the study started. They followed these people's diets. And what they found, the people that were in the worst diet, the most inflammatory diet, only ate 9 servings of fruit each week, 10 servings of vegetables each week, 2 servings of legumes, 9 servings of coffee and tea. Whereas the ones in the most anti-inflammatory, in that sense the best, 20 servings of fruits every week, 19 servings of vegetables, 4 servings of beans, 11 servings of coffee and tea. The ones with the most inflammatory diets, again, the processed foods, the sugar, the vegetable oils, that kind of thing, almost 3.5 times more likely to develop dementia compared to people on anti-inflammatory diets. So if you want to keep your brain functioning well and lower your risk of dementia, consider more fruits, vegetables, whole foods, less processed foods, less sugars, less vegetable oils, things like that. Again, I'm gonna have to think, it's inflammatory rating, inflammatory factor. I think it's inflammatory factor is that website that literally you get this PDF, or maybe it's an Excel spreadsheet that has thousands of foods and it gives them a score. It's really, really enlightening. All right. So I'm having my Tianchi with no caffeine, but I have had coffee today. I had 2 cups of coffee early this morning because I had a lot of TV interviews I had to record this morning and a lot of other work I needed to do. And I just haven't, I've been working really hard and haven't slept really well, so I had coffee. What effect does coffee have on your body? A group of researchers at UCSF, University of California, San Francisco, and this is with the American Heart Association, looked at different parameters for people that drank coffee, what its effect on physical activity and energy were, the amount of sleep people get, and the chances that you have an abnormal heart rate. So what they did, 100 people, they wore continuous heart rate monitors to assess their heart rhythms. They wore Fitbits on their wrist to track their activity levels and sleep, and they wore continuous glucose monitors. What they found, drinking coffee increased your risk of premature ventricular contractions, which is a type of irregular heartbeat, 54%. So, and basically it feels like your heart skips a beat is what that is. Now, coffee did have some good. People that drank caffeine on a daily basis had more physical activity. That's right, on the days that people drank coffee, they got about 1,000 extra steps than if they didn't drink coffee on the other days. For every additional cup of coffee they drink, people take 600 extra steps a day. So that's kind of interesting. But, as you might expect, caffeine decreases your sleep. The people that drank caffeine, on average, 36 minutes of sleep less per night than people that didn't consume coffee. And for every cup of coffee consumed, you lose 18 minutes of sleep. No effect on blood sugar levels. So just know that going in. Coffee, good for energy, maybe not so good for your sleep later that night. And if you're prone to issues with your heart, it can cause abnormal heart rhythms. Now that may not be a big deal, just something to know. The thing that I find interesting about coffee, and this is with a lot of my friends too, is people drink tons of it. And I feel like coffee is great up to maybe 1 or 2 cups of coffee a day. More than that, you're probably not getting the benefits you think of. Your body gets tolerant. It's a stimulant drug, just like the ADHD medicines and all of that. And your body's going to get used to it, and you'll need higher and higher levels of it, more and more caffeine to get the same effect. So try to, in my opinion at least, try to keep it to 2 cups of coffee a day or less. Now, if you're pregnant, maybe that's different. For years and years and years, we said if you're pregnant, you should really hold off on the caffeine. But a new study out of University of Pennsylvania shows that low to moderate caffeine consumption might actually be good for pregnant women. They analyzed over 2,500 pregnant women, followed them and surveyed, asking them how many drinks of caffeine they had every day, or caffeinated drinks they had a day. Certain weeks 10 and 13, they actually did blood samples to measure exactly their caffeine levels, and then followed them during their pregnancy for preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, gestational hypertension. What they found was caffeine consumption during pregnancy had no effect, no increased risk on gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, or gestational hypertension. And in fact, in the second trimester, it decreased the risk of gestational diabetes by 50%. So potentially good. Now, ACOG, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, says pregnant women need to stay at 200 milligrams of caffeine a day or less, basically 1 12-ounce cup of coffee. But it might not be as harmful or as dangerous as maybe physicians used to say back in the day. All right, speaking of pregnancy, see, it is tons and tons of powder at the bottom now. I've really got to figure this out. All right. Pregnancy, one of the things that some women get after pregnancy are stretch marks. And a new study out of the University of Michigan shows that they impact women's quality of life and their psychological and emotional well-being. What they looked at are the very early stretch marks called striae gravidarum. And then they took, how many people? 116 pregnant women with these early stretch marks and did this survey, the Dermatology Life Quality Index, which looks at embarrassment, self-consciousness, clothing choices, leisure activities, and interpersonal problems related to skin conditions. And what they found out is these early stretch marks impacted embarrassment and self-consciousness the most. But the larger, the more severe the stretch marks, the bigger the effects on quality of life, the choice of clothing, self-image and self-esteem, anxiety and depression, alteration of their social schedules and their leisure activity, and creation of interpersonal problems. Stretch marks were as bad for women emotionally as acne and psoriasis in terms of dermatology conditions. So this is a big deal, and not really, unless you're pregnant or an obstetrician, gynecologist, probably not anything to act on here, but this is something to know about and maybe counsel women on, or if there's, I don't honestly know if there are creams or lotions or oils or anything that can prevent stretch marks, but if there are, could have a dramatic impact on the emotional health of a lot of women. All right, last few that we're going to do, kind of fun. So as working in orthopedic surgery and sports medicine surgeon, sports medicine physician, I have seen thousands of runners over my career. Runners are great. I was a runner for many, many, many years. But runners also get hurt, especially beginning runners in my experience. The question is why? And so there's an interesting study that came out. Some Canadian researchers looked at 36 running studies looking at running injuries that involved over 23,000 runners, and they tried to figure out what the factor was that made running a sport associated with injuries. Was it training intensity and speed? Was it duration? Was it mileage? Was it running up or down hills? Was it shoe patterns and all sorts of different things? Well, probably not surprisingly, they couldn't find one factor that put you at risk for running injuries. And part of me, when I read this study, I was like, well, of course not. If you did a study of football injuries, you're not going to find one factor for, not every football injury is a collision and a tackle. I mean, you have non-contact injuries. You can have, there's all sorts of things. You could be, land awkwardly jumping for a ball and you hit your head on the ground. There's all sorts of ways you can get hurt playing football, just like running. But the reason that this matters is that it makes it very hard to give advice on how to prevent them. And the great example of that is the 10% rule for increasing your mileage, increasing your duration, increasing your speed. And it goes like this. So if you want to limit the chances of an overuse injury, what we tell people is, all right, let's say you run 10 miles a week, every week, but you want to increase that. The next week, you only increase it 10%. So 11 miles that next week. And then the week after that, if you want to increase it, then you're increasing it 10% again, which would be 12.1 miles. And that basically is a slow progression so that you don't end up with stress fractures and things like that. The problem is there's actually very little science behind that. Probably works better for beginning runners than maybe more experienced marathoners and things like that. But again, not every running injury is an overuse injury. In beginners, that's my experience, is it's either an overuse injury or they trip and fall, something like that. But there's not any one thing. It's not necessarily just a lack of stretching. It's not just less muscle mass or more muscle mass, so you should or shouldn't lift weights. There's not any one particular risk factor. So, like we talk about in every sport, runners, especially beginning runners, need to listen to their bodies. They need to see when something hurts, maybe adjust some aspect of their training for a few days, or even take a day or two off, which most runners don't do, and see if it gets better. And if it doesn't, maybe see a physical therapist, see a sports medicine physician or orthopedic surgeon to try to make sure that it's not something bad. But again, it's not, the 10% rule is one. The other one that would be kind of interesting to see if it could actually prove this would be that whole change your running shoes every 6 months or every 500 miles. I suspect that there's a whole lot of variables that make that far too imprecise. If somebody's a lot heavier, that's going to be different. If somebody's running on different surfaces, there's a lot of different things. So I think that's one of the problems with running, is there's not any one factor making injury prevention a little more difficult. All right, how many of you sleep with dogs or sleep with cats? And I don't know that I feel strongly either way. I don't have any pets right now, but in the past, when I was younger and our family had pets, sometimes they'd sleep in the bed with me. There's two ways to look at this from a health standpoint. One, what effect it has on you, and the other, what effect it has on your pet. Well, really interesting study, at least looking at what effect it has on pets. Sleeping with humans, all good. Increases their neurotransmitters, oxytocin and dopamine, basically your feel-good hormones. Gives them a higher level of trust. It develops a tighter bond with the humans, so it's definitely good for them. For the humans, maybe not so much. And here's what it comes down to. Because animals move, or maybe they bark in their sleep, change positions, things like that, people tend to have more fragmented sleep. They wake up in the middle of the night just very briefly. They don't even remember it. That's one of the great things about, like, if you have a sleep tracker like this Oura Ring, you wake up a lot more in the middle of the night than you probably expect that you do. Seems to happen more when you sleep with dogs and cats. And also, you tend to have higher levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, so you tend to not sleep as well. Now, people with anxiety or depression actually show some benefit to sleep, but it just doesn't seem to be all that helpful. For instance, there was a study back in 2017, they put sleep trackers on humans, put a dog in the room with them, and people slept about the same as they did when the dog wasn't in the room. The dog was in the room but on the floor, but once they moved the dog from the floor to the bed, their sleep quality declines. So, if you want to do it, I'm not going to tell you not to, because I know it's nice, they're warm, they're snuggly, but if you struggle to sleep, just keep that in mind. And last, and then I'll kind of get to some of your comments or questions, but the last, on this day leading into Thanksgiving, a day that we spend time with friends and family and experience love and happiness and way too much food. New study looks at the idea that it's healthier to give than to receive. We've heard that phrase forever. It's better to give than to receive. Well, there are some ideas or suggestions that it may be healthier to give rather than receive. Having a network of friends, family, what we call social support, is good for a number of health reasons. decreased risk of cardiovascular disease, decreased inflammation, which we've talked about, improved survival from things like heart disease, and at lower risk of death. That whole Blue Zones book that we talk about a lot, they talk a lot about social support. Well, specifically comparing giving to receiving, and this is really looking at older people, people that give support tend to have more life satisfaction than non-givers. They have a lower chance of death. They have improvements in their blood pressure, lower amounts of depression, and it impacts their immune system, their hormone systems, and all sorts of things. But here's the trick with giving. There has to be a middle ground. For people that give and never get anything back, it actually becomes counterproductive, and the stress from that becomes too much. So you've got to have social relationships. We all agree that that's a good thing, but there has to be a little bit of give and take. You have to be getting some back. But what you don't want to do is be a taker and not a giver. You want people in your life, and you want to help them out whenever is possible. Yeah, I don't have any pets either, but I am toying with the idea of getting a dog. So we will see how that goes here. I don't know what this is in relation to. 100 meters, 12 seconds. That's good. 16-year-old. Yeah, I'm not sure what that is about, but very excited for you there. And I said I was going to take some questions. AM, partial ACL tear, fearful of wrong operating procedure. Here's the thing, and I can't give medical advice. Partial ACL tears are a little bit of a misnomer. The ACL is a ligament in the center of your knee, provides stability to your knee, and it tears like a rope breaks. It's not a linear cut, it explodes. Sometimes there are a few fibers still attached. Most of the time they're not doing anything, they're stretched out. So most partial ACL tears are functionally complete tears. That ACL is functionally torn and that knee's functionally ACL deficient and unstable. So most of the time that needs surgery, but not all the time. There's probably been a handful of times that I had a partial ACL tear with somebody that didn't need surgery, but most of those, the MRI report will say something like high-grade partial ACL tear, but that you'll see a bone bruise pattern essentially showing that it's a functionally unstable knee, and that usually needs surgery. All right, that is all that we're going to do today. I am greatly appreciative for those of you that come regularly and comment and things like that. If you know other people in your life that care about health and wellness, tell them about the show. Have them join me on, show you the LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I may or may not actually start putting this show on Instagram. I've got some thoughts on that, but have them reach out and join the show. The more the merrier. So I am really excited for that. There are also some interesting things coming at the beginning of 2022. We very well may be going to a daily show, but not necessarily just like this. Tuesdays, Thursdays are going to stay the same, and probably the Friday Ask Dr. Geiers are going to stay the same, but Monday and Wednesday, they may be a little different, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in coming days. AM says, thanks from India, and then I don't believe this for a second, AM. I'm famous in India. I appreciate that if I am. I want to be famous here. Not that I actually want to be famous, but I want to have a lot of people that come to this show looking for information about living healthier, living longer, feeling and performing their best as they get older. So thank you guys so much. Those of you in the United States, I hope you have an amazing Thanksgiving. Try to eat all sorts of bad foods you want, but maybe try to limit the damage as best you can. Or you can join me on Monday with a 3-day fast. Well, maybe we'll talk about that on Tuesday. And again, talk to your doctor if you're going to do that. But having said that, thank you so much. Thank you to Jen and Brittany who helped me with so much related to this show and everything else that I do, social media and website wise. And thank you so much for watching or listening. I look forward to seeing you next week. And in the meantime, tomorrow, have a very happy Thanksgiving. Take care.